are in V2 in Rotterdam. Actually, it's bigger than I expected. It's a nice building. It's just renovated, and it's founded in 1981.
Yeah.
Wow, that's already more than 40 years. So it has a big history now. And it was originally was in another city, then moved to Rotterdam, and it's mainly about art in electronic network, electronic environment. So it's a bit specialized. So why is this specialization?
V2 is founded in Den Bosch, indeed, the city in the south of the Netherlands. And it was started by an artist collective, just squatting a place. Back then, squatting was still legal, and they opened this space for artist studios, but besides that, already had quite an active public program. They invited all kinds of bands. We had the first Netherlands concert of Sonic Youth or Einstürz de Neubauten. Merzbau from Japan flew in. That was quite some unique concerts. But immediately the artists were interested in exploring what a concert is as well. So contributing with kind of installations and really broadening this podium arts, let's say. And around that time, also lots of theorists, maybe still studying, found their way to V2 as well. Many artists doing what's now called artistic research, just doing quite some scientific experimentations. That also gained quite some attention of the theorists floating around. And from the start, we also immediately started publishing books reflecting on what kind of experiments that were going on. Back in those days, the artists still got a base income, like a small subsidy to every artist was able to get that. So all of the 8 founders involved, they were able to chip in with that money just to support their artist practice. They bought their first editing room, but also the first big projector, and like all of these technological innovative, they were able to offer all the artists to play around with. So I think that's in that tradition, we're still focusing on this digital aspect of society.
Yeah, the technology is pretty much changed.
Yeah.
In the last years. But let's talk about the program, because you have a lot. I have to read some, because you have events, meetups, these 3x3 things. And you have this Tryday, and I want to talk about that because it's really interesting. So every Friday afternoon, the artists came together, and artists and audience, and then do something together. And I love the idea. You can share your knowledge, share what you are doing. But how is it started?
When I started working here 9.5 years ago, I thought there's so many interesting experiments. We support, core is supporting artists in the developments of work. We do that with inviting artists to work with hardware developers, software developers, but I thought there's so much interesting stuff going on that the audience doesn't see. There's this interesting tension for me between an artist learning so much from doing an experiment and receiving the feedback from the audience, seeing how the audience reacts to it, if it works or not at all. And on the other way, it's also what can make a difference with us and a wide cube gallery. For me, the most important part of an artist's practice, it's the place where they experiment, and that's what we try to show in these live experimentation events, where you just walk in. We have a small open bar, so you can have a beer, and you can really get to know more how an artist thinks, what kind of decisions they make in the process, and that's for me also really the most exciting part. It's not like the finished dried painting we ideally want to hang on the wall. We want to facilitate this.
Yes, but on the other hand, you might not want to invite everyone in your studio. I don't know if you know Francis Bacon.
Yes.
Of course, this was exhibited his studio in Centre Pompidou, and I think also in Tate Modern London. And the studio was an absolute complete mess. You couldn't even walk there because there's newspapers everywhere and oil cans and everything which is possible. So I think normal people just see it and okay, let's burn it.
That's an interesting distinction. I would have loved to walk around in Bacon's studio because he was so critical about the art he was making, so many of the works never made it to the gallery. Like he burned quite a lot of stuff, destroyed it. So that's also what, as a curator, you get to do in studio visits. We have a mediated form of this. Sometimes the artist says, I want to explore how this algorithm works when it's instructing a dancer, let's say. And then we invite the circumstances, we put the computers here and a dancer, and we, on specific times, they just see this basic element, if it works. And also throughout the process, if that's interesting enough for an audience to call an artwork. I'm giving this example because we had one artist really doing a couple of experiment series with us, inviting a dancer, and then immediately saying, it won't be a performance, it won't be a dance, but I like all of these elements in it. And she later on turned it into a sculpture that had the movement. So like also this process, I'm a strong believer in failing as well. Artists fail all the time, they take different directions in finding out it doesn't work. For me, a really interesting part to present.
Maybe it's also interesting, I often ask that how to approach art if someone doesn't know any artist or doesn't know even the name of Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
That's not a problem maybe, but you have to have some kind of programs when you can invite people from outside, and then these kind of events could be very good to just introduce something that, okay, it's not a performance, because I don't know if I'm working in a bank and I read that there is a performance, yeah, okay, but I'm not interested. But if you cut it by elements and you show how it's gonna shape or something, it could be more interesting.
One of our formats is also somewhat of a symposium type of event. It's a one-night lecture, but we also try to pull it away from just having talking heads on the podium. So we do get some theorists in, and they bring their theoretic following, but we also actively put some either work in process or prototype or artworks in the space. In between, we always end with either some performative elements to it. So it's not this lecture series where you just sit down, also where you just download. I think that could be more engaging. But one of the main things that we do is we're here in Rotterdam in quite a artistic area. When we started here, it was still the bars were really shabby. It was the place where you can buy stolen car radios and illegal guns under the counter of bars, like this type of shabby place. But of course, it gentrified massively. We were one of the first art institutions coming here, but in the street we have one focusing on really contemporary art, one more of this DIY culture, concert venues that also do something with exhibitions. And we collaborate in various ways, and one of the ways is also just to, on Friday evening, it's shopping night. So the shops are open here a bit longer. In every city in the Netherlands it's different, but here it's Friday night. And what we did, instead of shopping night, we said it's going to be art night. So we call it Kunstavond, and together we all open for free. Have quite a diverse program, from exhibitions to live experimentations to lectures. We say they want to have a beer in the street, or they combine having a beer in the street with walking into the other institutions for free as well. If you look at the people that work from 9 to 5 and have not much of a knowledge for artistic names or trends that are going on, I really like that when you say, well, you just walk in, especially here, you also have a beer, walk around for a couple of minutes and decide it's either for you or not. And so sometimes people hop in and hop out again after one drink. Sometimes they stay the entire night having conversations.
And you have a book from one of my favorite artists, Douglas Copeland.
Oh yeah.
What was the title? Machines will make better choices than humans.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you have you read some kind of Douglas Copeland books?
Yeah, quite a lot.
For me, the Generation X was the book, the book of the, I don't know, the book of the, not just a year, but maybe it's it's a permanent thing. I have read it 5 times already, I think. What is your favorite book from Douglas Copeland, if you have any?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Because after we wrote Generation Epsilon, then some short stories, Life After God, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. My most gifted book is Machines Make Better Choices Than Human book that we did, and because it's such a small one of his short stories, and our previous director interviewed Douglas, adding to this publication. But this is also why I really like this book a lot, is that it's a small leftover of a collaboration that we did with all the other institutions. So we somewhat had Douglas as an unofficial fellow of the street. So we had Witte de Wit, other art space here, which is currently now called Melly, did an exhibition with all of his prints. We decided to publish this book. That's what I really like about him, is our neighbors. Worm is an art space that also, and they have an active film edit set, but they also have quite some, a community of performers. And what they did together with Douglas was organize a sci-fi workshop. Because of course they had this in various chapters, so they first made quite some books available to be inspired, and the young generation was indeed inspired, because you can find so many things in all of the books you mentioned. And afterwards they just approached it in this Douglas Copeland way to write together, and they exhibited the outcomes afterwards. I invite everybody to look at his art, like these really these one-liners. The title of our publication is a one-liner like that, but if like how it's being presented in contemporary art context, all of these quotes, they also do a lot.
Please call me next time when Douglas is here.
Yes.
Actually, this is one of the problems that I find. Well, like more than 100 artists, was really interesting for me, but it's really hard to follow all their presence in different spaces. And he's originally Canadian, so I didn't expect it to talk about Douglas Copeland here in Rotterdam.
Yeah.
Well, another interesting thing is what you have today afternoon, is a Rotterdam Live Coders community. When we talk about coding and art, okay, there was an exhibition, in Grand Palais and also in Centre Pompidou in Paris about coding and roboting things and these things. But still, I think that this is a kind of really small subculture within the art, because not everyone believes that with the computer. Maybe one of the artists in Brussels mentioned that he wants to dirt the hand, an artist, and not just sitting in the computer and do what, I don't know, bankers do. Okay, they do something differently. So why is this interesting for a space like V2 that someone's coming and coding night here?
There are two parts of this which I want to touch upon. One is that it's part of our community program. So what we also found out is that we have quite an ongoing active program, but also every now and then there's a week that we don't have anything on, and we just, by working with the artists, we found out that of course there's always a small group interested in using a space to just sit down with a coffee and share ideas. Well, that's what we decided, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, to really facilitate also communities. We just say, don't ask entrance fee. You can use our space. You can use our the tech that we already have, our infrastructure. We also actively promote it. The creative coding group is quite an active one, and sometimes they come and go. The creative coders. It started with, we really would like to have just leave the table here, a pot of coffee would be nice, maybe the big screen to connect it to, and we really want to share all of the projects that we're working on just amongst each other. It doesn't have to be a public event. By just doing this a couple of times, first it started with can we do it once, and then in a couple of months again, it became this active community where we also actively dip into, because there's always, of course, people from V2 knowing what kind of presentations were, and we can pull that into developing works as well. Well, that's the one part that we think it's so valuable to nurture such an ecosystem, especially if you like the creative coders. But of course, coding has been such a big part of the practices of many artists we worked with. One of the early examples that we recently reenacted, it's more about this tension of also using the available technology. One example I always give is Dick Rijmaker, who's a composer from the south of the Netherlands, and we, in the early days, actively started working with him. But his practice was he was able to use, like Bell Lab style, I always say, the Bell Labs in America. He was able to, in the Philips Labs, work at night to create electronic music or whatever, this type. So he was able to, computers weren't affordable at all, and he was able to experiment with it at night because these computers were not used anyway. And this idea, this bringing many artists we work with, they have a notion of really wanting to unpack and understand what's happening in society, and also like what kind of tools they potentially can work with. My idea of an artist is not longer this one who lives in his dirty studio by himself and he comes out with a brilliant painting, but it's people that collaborate in all ways possible.
I think this is one of the key things I learned from art, that you have to be connected to each other. So you have no excuse for that. You have artist-run spaces. You can go freely. Even in Rotterdam, you can go to Foundation BAD, for example, but there are many others. You have institutions, you have V2, you have a lot of things. But on the other hand, the computer nerds often stays home and just order pizza in online, and then even don't open the door. Oh, I don't want physical contact anymore. They do home office work, of course, and remote work. They don't need to be present, and of course with the technology of Teams, Skype, you don't need to physically be present, maybe to sign your contract, but that you can also do online now. So this is I think it's in contrary, because when you want to concentrate on your computer project, then you don't want to connect with anyone, you just want to concentrate. But later I think the places like V2 could help everyone to get some fresh air.
The one thing, we have a couple of projects that show this, like even we have quite some what I also would consider computer nerds that make quite a good sum of money in their commercial practice. They just, in a way you described, they just want to be at home and they know how to code their projects, and they are not asked too much questions. They just upload it and the company is happy. But there's also happened to bump into some of them, or they find a way, or there's one programmer connected to what an artist was doing and it's presenting it here. So one of the rare occasions of him coming out or her coming out, one of their friends made. And if you then start talking with them, there's always also don't feel creatively satisfied. Of course, if you work in these settings, especially online, it's more of reusing code and you just copy paste and try to do it as efficient as possible. You work in the lovely black box. The employer doesn't really know how much time it costs, so sometimes you can do it within 5 minutes if you feel like it, but you can also just say it takes 2 weeks, and even if it takes 5 minutes. But many of these artists, these coders, they come in and they also, with this feeling, they can also do something creatively. We have quite some examples of coders who said, I make enough money, but I really want to, this project touches upon, like, I don't know, climate change or like topics that are quite important to me. And I'm very happy to contribute in one way or another. They even take up holidays days to collaborate. And of course, in a context like V2, we can't give them the high salary that they're used to, but we can also just it's not for free. It's not a voluntary job, and that creates quite some interesting art as well. We had an example I'm now thinking of is Charles and Werner. They created this VR experience where you can pretend to be a chair. Developed it over the various stages with us. First presenting it here in small groups, afterwards presenting it at Ars Electronica to try it out, and it was part of a biennial in Norway. But it was this VR headset you put on, and you had to move, and you've then found out how actually a chair like the ones we're sitting on is moving, because you moved your hands, and by opening your eyes, it played with light, so you really embodied the chair. And that was such a project that came off really from a conversation of an embodied position, or how you can feel, really jokingly, maybe we can pretend to be a chair, and it turned out like something like this.
Well, thank you very much for the discussion.